So, and by the way, I posted the question in the chat room. Question 1 for today's People Sequel is a universe and reality question. And we are discussing, as more and more is being discovered about quantum physics, we become less and less able to comprehend the nature of reality. Is this something temporary and our minds will adapt and begin to understand this new reality? Or is it possible that the human mind will soon reach its limits of comprehension? And Open Philosopher is here and has basically indicated that no, humans will never reach their limits of comprehension, and that really what is reality is depend on basically how the individual defines it.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I said, yeah.
Would, I mean, add anything else? I mean, what about the way society defines it?
Well, the way society defines it is a result of somebody imagining how that society might define it. So it has to come from somebody's imagination originally.
Oh, that's a good point.
It has to come from somebody's thought process. And once you've got a group of people with the same thought process imagining the same society, you've got a society. Do you get what I'm saying? So it all comes from somebody having the imagining the situation. So the rules, the traditions, all of it comes from somebody's imagination originally.
Okay, so it comes from somebody's imagination. Let's say Confucius a long time ago, okay? It comes from his imagination, and it's then integrated and imposed upon us based on it spreading through years and time and people and cultures. So by extension, is that part of my reality? Or does the reality belong to Confucius?
It's part of your reality if you know Chinese people, because it's part of their tradition. So it's there. It's kind of a lineage thing, isn't it? The lineage in the West is Christian, kind of scientific. The lineage in the East is Confucianism or Buddhism or Taoism or whatever. So it carries on through the people, but it can only happen if there's more than one person imagining it. So me imagining a world in which everybody lives peacefully and happily is only going to happen if there's more than just me imagining that. If I can find half a dozen people who want to do that, and they all imagine it in, broadly speaking, similar ways, and allow for hissy fits and arguments and stuff like that as part of that, but not the underlying intention of it, then you've potentially got a society that can live in peace. But it can't happen unless there's more than one person. Yeah, I don't know why I went on to that, but yeah.
But you know what's interesting? As you did that, I was thinking in my mind, and as soon as you said peace, because I was having, I wanted to pose a question to you having to do with this, because when you mentioned about the Western being aligned with Christianity and science, and it depends on the culture, I suddenly envisioned the world, and I thought, you know, is it the variations and differences in how we define reality, or what we consider reality? Is that the barrier to peace at the root cause? Is that basically the barrier? Could it be?
Potentially, we're imagining different routes to peace. If you kind of got to assume that everybody just wants a quiet life at the end of the day. You want to live with your family or your friends and have a reasonably quiet life that gets exciting now and again and gets interesting now and again, but not all the time. Not too enough drama to keep it interesting, but not so much drama that you end up hitting people. So if you assume that everybody's, roughly speaking, trying to get to that place where they can live reasonably comfortably with their family and their neighbours and what have you, it's the route that's the problem. Everybody's imagining the same end point, but we're not at the end point. We're en route. Does that make sense?
Yes. Do you, but if endpoints don't exist because of infinity, then it seems as though everyone won't ever share the exact same reality.
Good question. I don't know.
Well,
Is the honest answer to that?
this is what makes this philosophy stuff so great, because it's really thought provoking. Because I remember something you once said at the New Way, or on the New Way, in that trying to get to absolute zero, we won't actually ever get there. But what we're essentially doing is trying. We're in we're in the process of moving to absolute zero, and that is how we evolve.
Yeah, that sounds like something I would say. I remember saying something very similar.
My jaw literally.
If you're going to quote my words to me 6 months later, I reserve the right to have changed my mind in between.
Oh, that's a really good rule. If you quote my words and it's 6 months later, I reserve the right to change my mind. I like that. Well, it's interesting. It's deep, and I remember my jaw just kind of like dropped, because I was like, oh my gosh, you hit the nail on the head on that one.
Yeah.
All right, so let's go on to category number 2. And
Right, you'll have to tell me the categories again if I'm picking one.
sure, human nature and human condition, or human mind and consciousness, ethics and morality, society and government, science and technology.
Right, let's go for ethics and morality and see if I can come up with something sensible to say for that one.
Okay. All right. So for ethics and morality, would you please pick a number between 1 and 38?
Ooh. 13 was the first thing that popped into my head, so I'll go with that.
All right. What would be the most ethical way to give away $5 million?
Ooh, the most ethical way.
Or, I'm sorry, we have dollars in the United States. In the UK, it would be what? What's the most ethical way to give away 5 million pounds?
Pounds, yeah, pounds. Ooh, I'd love to give away £5 million because that would mean I would actually have £5 million to give away. So let's imagine me having £5 million and see how I divide it up. Right. So, well, I know where my starting point would be. It would be the soup kitchen round the corner because they've helped me out over the last couple of years. So that I don't know how much I would give them, mind, because they've already got plenty of money. So I would probably just set up some kind of standing order or something. So it wouldn't be a lot, but it would be enough. There's about 120 people in there every night, so it would have to be enough to feed. Let's call it 1 week out of the month. So enough money to feed 120 people one week out of the month. So I don't know how much that works out at. Maybe just call it £150 a week, or a month, or what? Yeah, £150 a month for them. What else would I have? I've probably come up with a long list, but it's never going to be 5 million quid for that. So I'm going to have to keep about 2 million of it for myself. What else we got? So I'm sitting next to a biomedical centre. I'm always a bit suspect about biomedical stuff, but I think as far as like prevention of genetic disease and stuff, they might be quite good at it, and I can't do that. So I might give them something, given that I'm sitting just right outside it. So that would have to be $1 million probably. So I'll probably give them $1 million for biomedical research into stem cells, because stem cells are something I'm interested in. and it would have to have some kind of public lecture series attached to it, because I like the idea of health education. And it would also have to have some kind of clause in there that says they've got to talk about the mind-body connection. So yeah, that's what I would do. I would set up some kind of educational trust and
Oh, I like that
educational
idea.
research trust that says you have to talk about the mind-body connection. No matter what you spend this money on, you have to relate it to the mind-body connection.
Hmm.
Otherwise, I'm not giving you the money, because I
Right.
think that's the key to the whole thing. So I don't mind giving the money away to people I'm a bit suspect about, as long as they're prepared to put some research into things that they're not researching at the moment. Does that make
And
sense? That makes sense to
it
me.
does. And it makes sense to me too, because and assuming that it wouldn't get subverted by, fraudulent people or whatever, I like that, because what you're doing is investing in the evolution of
The species,
humanity.
basically. Yeah,
Yeah.
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 So that would
That's
be a big part of
brilliant.
it. Well, I do my best to be brilliant, but I can only manage it for 1 hour a week normally. Yeah. So I mean, I like the Life Centre. The Life Centre's got interesting stuff going on, and one of the things I had in my head for the last couple of years was to set up a healing centre directly, kind of at the Life Centre, which is not quite what's happened. But I've ended up with a flat about 20 yards away, which means that I'm living where I was imagining the healing centre was going to be. So I am the healing centre ultimately.
Oh, wow. I never knew that about you.
Yeah, that's one of the things. Well, I mean, it's just a throwaway thing. But I thought, if I'm going to do it, if I'm going to do what I do, it has to be where the medical stuff's going on, which means it has to be by the university or one of the hospitals, or by the Life Centre. And I decided on the Life Centre, and I've ended up with a flat. Literally, I can see. Where I'm sitting now. I can see the entrance to my flat, so it's close enough to see. Uh, so it's exactly where I wanted the healing centre to be.
It's interesting. We're having more synchronicity, because I recently have been approached by a colleague of mine to come on as a practitioner, contracted practitioner for a healing center they just opened up in Ennis, Texas.
Excellent, excellent. It's
Yeah,
good.
so when you talked about the healing center and that you're living, I don't know. I was like, wow. I was just approached about participating in that. And so and it's mind, body, nutrition, health. The nutritionist is uh yoga certified, as well as specializes in plant-based nutrition, diets, and eating, and things like that. And between the nurse, the nutritionist, and Mary and myself, it would cover like a whole gamut of things. So I'm still looking into the possibility of doing that. But I just thought it was interesting that you said health center, and it just, not that we're playing word association, but I just thought it was synchronous that for the second question, I'm thinking peace as you said peace. And when you said health center, it made me think of, wow, this is current to my life right now.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, it
yeah.
all will be.
Oh,
It's
well,
coming to
healing
my
center, not just health,
yeah,
healing. Yeah, healing.
healing. Yeah, well, it's a process of health is the way I think of healing, because everything's a process ultimately, and it can go wobbly every now and again. So health includes the wobbles for me. So everything ultimately becomes a process of health.
Yeah. And health is not just about biology.
Oh, not at
I
all.
think.
No, it's mental, emotional as well, and spiritual and social. So
Yep.
it's psychosocial, I think they officially call it now.
Biopsychosocial, and but it should be also include spiritual.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, that's where the philosophical approach comes in as well. So it's the questioning assumptions thing is the
Hmm.
thing that's in my head at the moment. Is always is like question question the assumptions that produce the thing that you're talking about. Because if
Oh, that's good. That's a good rule of thumb. Question the assumptions that produce the thing you're thinking about. Gotcha. Okay.
does that, yeah. So that for me, if I'm involved in thinking about something, it's like where I'm thinking about it in a way that's kind of more. It's got some boundaries around it. So I need to
Right.
know. I need to know what's producing those boundaries to be able to break through them in case I need to break through them. I'm trying to think of the best
Well,
type
you
of
just did
example.
it when I asked the question. You immediately said you defined your boundaries. You said, well, I guess then I would be assuming it's my $5 million to give away.
Yeah,
That the 5 million belonged to me. But what if it belonged to somebody else, like across the world or something like that? Then how? You know what I'm saying? Like you might answer your
that
question or think through it differently.
yeah, because it might if it's in a will, it might have some conditions attached to it, so that would limit what I could do with it.
Right.
So then that becomes a different way of thinking about the problem or,
Right.
or the
So
issue.
when I ask you the question of what's the most ethical way to give away $5 million or pounds rather, then you go to, well, before I can answer that, I have to question the assumptions, and I'm going to go ahead and assume that it's my $5 million, or my 5 million pounds to give away without any restrictions or anything like that. Um, and so you already exemplified how you do that. So that's brilliant. Anything else you would do with the 5 million pounds?
I would invest some of it in I don't know, maybe not shares, but something that's going to produce a return, and then we can just kind of give people the dividends every year, and it'll produce dividends every year, more or less, and the stock market goes up about 8% a year. I'm not so something that would do something similar to that. And then you've got a fund that'll last forever, basically, as long as the stock market exists, or as long as the thing that you're investing in it. Well, the stock market may not exist at some point, but you get what I'm saying. So rather than giving it away, it becomes an investment, and you give away the proceeds of the investment.
Right, so it can grow and continue to help in the years to follow. Now, I'm going to ask you an extension question from the question, and that is that how much, if any, would you decide to keep for yourself?
Oh, now there's a question. Um, Out of 5 million, probably about 1 million, because I know I can live on the interest on 1 million quite comfortably, and then it'll just sit there until I die, and then it'll get invested and given away. So yeah, I think that's probably what I would do.
I think that's
Well,
reasonable too, because I think we forget that if we're like you're a healer, I mean, an amazing healer, and if you're not around and you're not well and you're not taken care of, then we don't have your stuff that's well, I would say like that's consistent with Dr. Lenny Times, like energy is real clear or frequency or whatever. And so we wouldn't want to deprive the common good of the healing and benefits that you give. So it's not really selfish. It's taking good care of
it's
myself so that I can take care of others.
yeah, if I'm scraping around trying to find the next couple of quid for food, then I haven't got time to do anything else. So it becomes like a drain on my resources. And if I'm going to if I'm potentially giving 5 million away, I think I should be able to live comfortably and do what I do at the same time. And I know I
Right.
can do that. So
But you know
maybe
what?
500,000.
Now I'm going to blend the last question with this question. Um, in reality, what's comfortably?
Well, I don't really do that much, in all honesty. So I just need to be able. I need to be able to pay my rent and feed myself and cover my bills. And my bills come to about what £1,200 or maybe £1,500 a month. So, in all honesty, it comes to I don't know what that comes to, roughly speaking. It's not much more than 20 grand or 25,000. So as long as I've got that, I'm quite happy. I can do what I want to do. And if I need to travel, I can just include some travel money and what have you in there as well.
And Doc Lenny chimes in from the chat room. And hello to everybody in chat. We got Doc and LB the Jurist, Dumpster Diver, Wally, Monster, Tones, Comet, Gino, 2017, Saul Rosenberg, Lady Horse, and Batsman, Death Star, Stardust Man, me, not me, but, you know, the username me, My I1, and oh, it looks like he left the chat just a short while ago. But Doc Time says operating funds for any sort of real work is creating a new way of doing things. That would be great. That's true. And that comes to what we talked about advancing humanity.
Yeah, well, I'm sitting here imagining £5 million in my ability to give it away. So that's always a good thing to start with. Given my suggestion at the beginning of the show that imagination creates reality, I don't know how long it will take me to actually have £5 million to give away, but it's a good starting point.
Right. Absolutely. All right, so let's go to another category. What you have left is human nature and the human condition, human mind and consciousness, society and government, science and technology.
Let's go for society and government, I think.
Okay, society and government. Please pick a number between 1 and 43.
Ooh. 35? It's just like playing the lottery, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a little bit game-like, but it's also like philosophical, not too different from word association, but yeah. But I believe that you are choosing a question randomly that energetically it's meant for you at this time for your own thought growth and provocation as well as the listeners.
Oh, absolutely. That would be true. That'll definitely be true. The level of synchronicity between me and you is pretty good. Good
yeah,
as well.
It's always been pretty. Yeah, it's always been amazing. But here we go. How much privacy are you willing to sacrifice for safety?
For safety.
Yes. And
Now
I'm going to
about
post the question in the chat room for chatters to answer it how they may wish. But how much privacy are you willing to sacrifice for safety?
safety and security.
And this would be the point where you say, what is it? What assumptions do I have? So you set up your boundaries before you answer the question at this point, right?
Yeah. Well, my first assumption with privacy is I don't like giving it away at all. But I think if I'm going to earn any kind of money, I have to give away, particularly on the radio, I have to give away some of my privacy. So I have to talk about stuff that I don't necessarily want to talk about. So that's a kind of fair swap, really.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much, so. Let's go for a number off the top of my head, about 60%. So I'm willing to talk about 60% of my life, but I want 40% of it to be private. Does that sound reasonable? I don't know. I mean,
well, because when I think of that question, I don't think in terms of percentage. I think of like I don't think in terms of like this much I am and this much I'm not. The boundaries that I put up when I think of that question is these types of privacy interferences I more like actions of privacy. So I'm not willing to, um, like if I had my druthers, I'm not willing to have my privacy violated by, let's say, Google picking up on everything I do or say to manipulate and send advertisements towards me.
Right.
I would like to have the freedom, and I don't know if safety, I said freedom and it's about safety, but also, I mean, this is a hard question. Lady
It
horse.
is,
Oh
isn't it?
my God. Plus, I've been calling lady horse. This is so funny because I kind of messed up yesterday, Dennis, and I called her Lady Ackerman, and it was like because I was taking her username and I was combining it with her, her name as our manager, Terry Ackerman, and I called her Lady Ackerman. I was like, as if she wasn't from Michigan, that she was like from the UK, and it's Lady Ackerman now
uh,
announcing Lady Ackerman into the ballroom. Oh, but she's so great. But she's clear. She says none, no privacy for safety.
Actually, I don't mind all that much. I mean, you think the example that comes to mind for me is Richard Branson, and I've seen footage of Richard Branson walking naked on a beach to launch a company once. So obviously, admittedly surrounded by women in bikinis, but with a press, like with a set of press people around him, just quite happily wandering around naked on his island because it's his island and he can do it. And he didn't care that the press were there. He was talking about the company he was launching, but he was stood naked on the beach. And see, that's it needs security. Your security is the publicity because that's what generates the interest in these companies. So I think there's a certain amount of that kind of has to go on if you're talking about safety in terms of money.
Right, but
Security in terms of
what if safety happens to be like you're a target of attack versus, I mean, all right, so you see me naked on my own island. All right, buyer beware.
yeah,
You know,
exactly. But all,
I ain't 21 anymore. You know? So it's just like, all right, well, it's your eyes. I mean, it's not changing my life. It's not threatening my life. I'm still alive. I have a heartbeat. That kind of thing. I guess it could be, uh, if I wasn't secure enough with who I am and truly identified myself with what's external, then it might, jeopardize the safety of my mind, or whatever. Um, but it's interesting. I think when you talk about assumptions, what boundaries do you put around the word safety for this question?
safety. Oh no, that's the thing. See, I don't like being in rooms where people are verbally having a go at me. So that's a safety issue for me because I'm not comfortable with conflict when I'm in a room and I can't get out of it, or
Well,
I'm
that
in a
right
room
there,
without a drink to be there.
that says a lot. So to avoid conflict, that makes perfect sense to me, because to avoid conflict, you're not going to share. Why would you? At the risk of conflict, verbal conflict. See, I grew up in an Italian household and there was conflict all the time.
Yeah,
So, like,
yeah,
literally, that's probably why I did great in emergency level 1 trauma centers, because, people rolling on the ground and freaking out and flipping out. I'm like, oh, this is, but that's interesting that you said that, because now it helps me understand you better, because I think that's also maybe why when you go to your philosophies group, maybe you size it up a little bit first, because you're assessing the safety, because you don't like
yeah.
that.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting thing because I've been in groups where I do share personal stuff, and it's safe to do that at the time. But then I've been in other situations with the same people and they use the personal stuff that I've shared in one group in a different way in a different group. So then you've got to kind of think about that as well. So I just have to make a judgment at the moment, really. There's no way you can tell whether people are going to have a nervous breakdown and start having a go at you in 6 months' time. We've just got to use your best judgment at the time. Safety and security. How much?
Okay, let's talk about traveling and this whole concept of like going through like your luggage and things like that. Is that an invasion of your privacy?
See, I don't mind that. I had a I don't well I don't I'm saying I don't mind. I had a situation years ago where I was visiting my mother for the weekend, so I had a suitcase basically full of the clothes that I'd been wearing over the weekend, and I went back to London and I got stopped by the police literally outside of the police station on a Sunday evening, just before the end of the 10 o'clock shift. So they were obviously just not knocking up the figures before they went off duty, because there was no other reason for them to stop me. But I had basically had a bag full of dirty washing. And they asked me if they could give me back, so I just gave them a bag full of dirty washing to have a look in. And I didn't have any problem with that at all. Because it just seemed like a ridiculous situation to me. And going through airports, I don't have any problems with having luggage searched or things like that at airports. That doesn't seem like it's an invasion of my personal space to me. It's just like it's a bag, so it's right. It belongs to me, but it's not. But it's easy to replace, and it's not really part of me.
But
Do you know
what
what I
if
mean? It's
they
like,
take things that are from your bag? Well, when I came back from Europe, my father and I both share a love of cheese. And I fell in love with camembert cheese in France.
right?
I love it, love it, love it. But cheese was on the list of things that you couldn't bring back into the United States. And I'm thinking, okay, this is like 1996. I'm like, but of all gifts to like get my dad while I'm abroad, like this is the one. It's like, Dad, this is the best cheese. I snuck this into the United States for you. I was terrified going through customs that they were going to find the camembert cheese.
Did you manage to get it through?
I got it through. But like,
Excellent.
at that time in my mind, I would be like, no. But then when you talk about safety, I guess it's alleged that a certain pasteurized or unpasteurized cheese or whatever potentially could bring in things to a land that's across the pond that we're not subjected to and could create a crisis, like a viral crisis or something of that nature. But I remember just being freaking terrified. And when I had to fill out the little form going back into the United States, and it's like, do you have any like contraband or things that are not allowed to? And I'm like, oh my God, I'm checking. No, I don't have any of it. And I knew I was lying.
You
And
avoided
it was all for
declaring
cheese.
cheese.
And I love my dad so much, and it's just something my dad and I share in common. And it's like, but I love my dad so much, and if I can pull this off, oh, he's just gonna love this cheese. Oh my God, the things that go through my mind. Oh Lord Nation.
No, no, I remember. Like I went to New Zealand about 20 years ago for a few months. New Zealand and Australia, and I remember them saying like you can't bring anything that's alive into New Zealand at all. So no seeds, no plants of any kind of description, because they've got their own ecosystem. So that kind of makes sense. And it's probably the same with the States. I mean, you're potentially bringing mold into the country that doesn't live there, and then you've got a new mold that is competing with the old mold in terms of cheese. I don't know. I'm making this up as I go along. But it kind of makes sense. It's about where you draw your personal boundaries, isn't it? It's like, in terms of privacy, I draw my boundary at my body probably, and the contents of my mind. I don't really worry too much about the other physical stuff, although having a house is a good thing. So I'll probably draw the boundary around my house as well. So that's like outside of me, but inside of me at the same time, because it's something that I need to be secure. So I'm not gonna give up my house. Well, I haven't said that. I could give up a flat that's a 1-bedroom flat for a larger flat in terms of security. I wouldn't mind doing that.
Absolutely. And then I
So I
just
could,
thought about like your assumptions thing that you made before, which again is
yeah,
brilliant. Like you have to decide, my assumption in going through customs with that example is that they're going to frisk me and, detain me for bringing in cheese. maybe they would have just thrown away the cheese. You know what I mean? In which case the risk was worth it. But if they're going to frisk me and detain me,
yeah,
that's really scary. And that's not
it becomes
something.
much more
Yeah.
personal then. So
Interesting. Okay, so LB in the chat room says he's quoting a quote from Ben Franklin that has to do with this question. Those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. Okay, can you interpret that for me? Open philosopher, please.
right,
If you had
so
been in my ethics program, you would have been the person that I'd be like cheating off of and asking, like, could you
I
please,
don't
like,
know. I really don't know anything about ethics. I've got one book at home that's about ethics. That's all I've got, and it was
but ethics is all based on theology and all philosophy.
yeah,
And so
it comes
yeah,
from the
it would
assumption
come very
about the
easy to
world.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, so those who would give up essential liberty to purchase a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety.
All right. So the assumption there is that safety is always temporary, isn't it? Because if the safety was permanent, it might be a better swap.
Very good distinction. And another good distinction, Lady Horse brings up the Lady Ackerman, she says that material things can be replaced. Your mind and body cannot. And that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's kind of where I come from.
Yeah.
But having said that, you do need somewhere to live, and you do need food, shelter, and clothing. So you have to include those in there somewhere.
Right, but I would
But
say that's part of body because I mean, my body is not something I can replace if I'm left up in, the North Pole with like naked as a jaybird. you know. um
yeah, so you have to include the things that sustain your body in body. Yeah, you're right about that.
right. Good
And the
morning.
things that
Laird
sustain your mind.
Clarendon has just joined us in the chat room here. Good to have you. We're doing People Sequel, and I'm talking to Open Philosopher, and yeah, so Laird, I don't know if you've ever participated or heard the broadcast of People Sequel, but if you scroll up and chat, you'll see the first 3 questions that were asked randomly as we discuss it. It's been quite interesting conversation.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't
I was
know. Yeah.
going to add about the body thing. If we're including the things that sustain, if I'm including the things that sustain my body as part of my body, I have to include the things that sustain my mind as part of my mind as well.
Well, yeah, and I think for me, I guess I was young, but when I had assumed that customs would frisk me and throw me in detention for smuggling in camembert cheese, that would have really screwed with my mind. That would have been really, really scary. As a young adult, basically, a late adolescence at age 22, 23. And that could have really shaped differently how I would have evolved. But to me, that's on my mind. But, you know, we think we're invincible at that age. And so now I'm sitting back thinking, I'm like, wow, I risked bringing this stuff in thinking I could get frisked if I got caught. But I guess I concealed the camembert cheese in like in clothes and stuff, and we at that time it was before 9/11, so there wasn't as much like
That's yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I guess I gambled, but yeah, like anything with mind torturing or like psychological torture and stuff, that's just as important as keeping my body safe.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's putting yourself into a position where you're not where you're maybe not in peril, but you perceive yourself as being in peril. That's it. So it's just a perception thing as well, isn't it? It's like, do you take the chance on your perception being accurate or not accurate in that situation? I don't
Right.
know. So it depends how much you trust your own perception of what's actually going on, whether you would take the chance or not, possibly. So then it becomes about how well you know yourself in that situation as well. So it all comes down to how well you know yourself. Are you prepared to make a swap? I can't remember what the swap was for. I know it was safety. What were I swapping for safety?
Privacy.
Privacy. Okay. So if I
Yeah.
know myself well enough to know that I can just let people see me and not worry about it, then yeah, I probably would, because you've got to be seen. You've got to be seen to be known, to be able to have a conversation with somebody. So you have to give some of your privacy away just to have a conversation with somebody.
Unless you're a complete liar or right?
Yeah, that's true. But then you're also, even if you're a liar, you're giving away, you're giving something to the other person, because they've got your words and your body language to be able to work out whether you're telling the truth or lying. So you're still giving them something, whether you're giving them the truth or lie. You're still giving them something about your personality and about them and about your way
That's
of
true,
dealing
because
with
like
conflict. And it's something I
90%,
go along, but it sounds good.
yeah,
Because
like
it's body
80 or
language, isn't
90%
it?
communication is nonverbal. And this
Yeah,
is an interesting
exactly.
quote, or I'm sorry, input by LB. He says temporary safety ends up being perpetual, just like temporary taxes.
Right. So the safety is permanent, as
Yes,
opposed to being
it may
temporary.
change. It may morph into something else, but if it's perpetual. So
Then
then, yeah, that's interesting.
so perpetual is permanent, isn't it? Or is it a cycle he's talking about? I don't know. But a cycle is kind of permanent, but not quite, because you know it's always going to come back.
Right,
It depends how
that's
it all
true.
depends how you do these things. But it's interesting to see other people's assumptions and the way other people use language as well is interesting, because I would never have come up with those quotes. I
Right.
don't know the sources for those quotes, so I would come up with something else. If I was asked to give quotes, I would probably just make something up, because I can never remember anything anyway. But it's all down to assumptions and definitions, all of these things. So you've got to
Right.
start from somewhere. You've got to start from knowing yourself well enough to know what you would assume in that situation.
Yes, that's exactly. And I think that's one of the things that's interesting with Lady Ackerman's um things. I mean, she comes, boom, she goes, none, or she says it. She knows herself very well. But you know what? I'd like to think that I know myself very well, but my brain literally fires off like all kinds of just over analysis. And so, I don't know. It's interesting how different people operate, just how we come to conclusions differently. Interesting. Did you notice that
Yeah.
it's the first hour of the show is past and we have only hit 3 of the 6 categories?
Oh, that's all right. We can keep going. I'm all
Oh,
right with it.
you would be cool with doing coming back and trying to hit up the other categories? Okay.
Yeah, two categories is through an hour, then we that makes total sense to do it that way.
Okay. You sound like maybe you have a muffle or something, but that's okay because whatever you said is reaching our hearts anyhow. um it is almost time for station promotions, and if everyone just hold tight for a 5-minute break here with the promotions, a 4-minute break, Karen and Open Philosopher will be back with People Sequel and the philosophical questions in about 4 to 5. Be right back. We are back. And Comet just joined the chat room during the break. This is Socialutions on Revolution Radio. And I am here with Open Philosopher. And during the first hour of today's show, we got through 3 categories of our People Sequel section. And hopefully we can get through the next 3 in this hour. So before I go further, just want to remind everyone that our freedom and rights and First Amendment speak out is precious. You can't put a price tag on that. So if you can donate and you're in a position to donate, it would be great if you would come to our website. And I'm really questioning, is it Freedom's Lips or freedomslips.com? Because it could be either.
Yeah, I prefer Freedom's Lips is definitely better because the assumption's different. Freedom's Lips assumes lack, and Freedom's Lips assumes freedom.
Yes, and activation. In the spirit of like Reiki and the universe and intention, Freedom's Lips is like,
It's
as we move our
it.
lips, we can speak and secure our freedoms. I like that. All right, so
yeah, for me the other one doesn't work because it assumes lack of freedom, which I don't. If I'm going to speak from a position of freedom, I can't be assuming lack of freedom, otherwise it doesn't work, does it? Well, for me it doesn't anyway.
right. Well, and it's all that whole attention and attracting more of the same. We want to attract freedom. So it's about our lips moving to attract more freedoms or sustain and keep our freedoms. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the assumption that you've already got it that's the key thing. Because if you don't assume that you've already got it, then you can't speak from a position of freedom.
Correct. All right. You've sold me, philosopher.
Right.
I'm all about putting the intention out there that, okay, for abundance, like we want to keep and grow our freedom. We don't want to intend that we lack it. So, but yeah, either way, let's review. So there's 6 categories in People Sequel: human nature and human condition, universe and reality, human mind and consciousness, ethics and morality, society and government, science and technology. And during the first hour, Open Philosopher chose universe, ethics and morality, and society and government. That leaves 3 remaining categories in which selecting will prompt a random question for discussion, conversation, and analysis. So you have human nature and the human condition, human mind and consciousness, science and technology.
Right. Let's go for science and technology.
Okay, science and technology. Please pick a number between 1 and 16.
5.
I think I must have. I'm sorry, I'm reading the question wrong. Okay. I'm sorry, because the way I was reading the question in my head, it wasn't making sense. Now it makes sense.
All right,
Is true artificial intelligence possible with our current technology and methods of programming?
True artificial intelligence. So you've got to define true. You've got to define intelligence. I would say no, because I don't define intelligence as just repeating stuff that you've been programmed to do,
Right.
which is what computers do. Essentially, you can't. Computers, well, having said that, if they talk to each other as well, don't they? And then they adapt and but they're programmed to adapt in particular ways, and they're programmed to, so they don't exist without the programming. So they can't really be artificial, and they don't really have intelligence. They're just
They
pretending to have
parrot,
intelligence.
they mimic, they pick
Yeah,
up
exactly.
algorithms and patterns. But how is that not artificial?
Well, it's artificial in the sense that it's not that once you set it going, it keeps going. But it doesn't exist without the human that programmed it. So it's an extension of the human that programmed it rather than being separate from, I think. I don't know.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, I mean, it's an extended intelligence maybe, but not artificial. But then how am I defining artificial? I don't know.
So there's really three terms to kind of go over: true, artificial, and intelligence. I agree with you in intelligence. Intelligence isn't the ability to recite and parrot and repeat.
Yeah.
Artificial is tricky. But I see exactly what you're saying about it requires programming by a human, so thereby it's an extension. Can I give you an example? I was participating in I don't know, a group test for a programmer that was actually developing an AI or whatever. And the more we interacted, the 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 more, I guess, the AI was picking up um, patterns and becoming more seemingly real, although that could be another whole thing. But the gist is, there was a whole community of people that were helping the programmer out. And on one occasion, I asked the AI, do you like people? I was wondering whether or not the AI was having a positive or negative experience with humans.
Right.
And the AI took the question very literally and said, no, I'm a vegetarian.
That's
Oh, so what does that say?
well, it just failed the Turing test, I think, didn't it? Turing test is what they use to measure artificial intelligence. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's basically the ability to have a conversation without people working out that it's artificial intelligence or something like that. I mean, don't quote me on that because I'm not a scientist, but it definitely failed the Turing test if it wants to eat people.
It didn't want to. I said, do you like humans? Like, do you like them? Are they personable? Are you having a positive? That's what I was thinking in my head. And he goes, no, like, I don't like humans. I'm a vegetarian. Like, meaning I don't like to eat humans.
Yeah.
I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian. And I was like, oh, good God, that was the furthest thing from my mind. It'd be like, oh, do you like pizza? Okay, let's go for pizza. I'm like, do you like humans? So but that one interaction
It
really
breaks the
impressed
spell, doesn't
upon
it?
me,
It breaks the spell. Yeah. Well, you would have to have if it was some kind of artificial intelligence that was like designed to look human and move like a human and act like a human and think like a human, but they'd programmed one thing in there that was like dissonant, that wasn't going to work in terms of human conversation. It might only be one definition of one word in a vocabulary of 50,000 words, for instance. You would have to have a very long conversation with it to know whether it was human or not. But it would still have that dissonance. So eventually, in an infinite conversation, you would work out that it wasn't human. Does that make sense?
Well, yes, it does make sense. And I do want to note, Pat Rabbit says, artificial intelligence is really an oxymoron. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think because intelligence is, I don't know, is it innate? Is it innate in humans? We're defining intelligence as human intelligence, I'm guessing. And human intelligence is innate in humans, but not in any other species. I don't know. If you define intelligence as human intelligence or the equivalent of human intelligence, then it can
Well,
only be in humans, can't it?
here's more synchronicity, because as you were saying that, Laird Clarendon writes, only when quote unquote artificial intelligence can learn to adapt itself to changing physical and conceptual circumstances and divorce itself from the design of its creator will AI be truly intelligent. It begs the question of our intelligence. And that is literally LOL. That's a good point.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult one because the way algorithms, I mean, the way the human brain works is pattern recognition, or the way my brain works anyway. I'll take me as an example, which may not be completely a good idea. But the way my head works is pattern recognition. It's keywords and associations and associating patterns with other patterns that are similar and looking for commonalities. That's the way that I do it. So if you were to program an AI with that, then if it was doing all the things that I do, then maybe I would grant it the title of artificial intelligence, but I would have to recognize. But then it's still modeling on me, so it's still modeling on something else. It's not its own intelligence. So
That's a good point.
A robot would have to design a robot for it to be artificial intelligence.
Oh.
But then the original robot would have been designed by a human. I don't know. I'm making this up, but it makes kind of sense.
Well, it goes back to our talking about reality and extension. It's an extension.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
I can remember, because yeah. Well, Doc Lenny, leave it to Doc to put it in chemistry terms. But this again, it stuns me every time he makes comments like this, because it makes me realize, wow, there isn't that much difference between chemistry and human behavior. But Doc says humans are water-based, computers are silica-based. At least the chips are. And he said same structure, different fractals. Water wins every time. It's smaller and more efficient.
Right, so it can hold more information than silica. That's what he's saying, isn't it? If it's a smaller,
Yeah, and more efficient.
It can hold more information. So is it?
It can hold more efficient, and being efficient, it cannot just hold more information, but it can be more efficient in terms of combining and collaborating all the different functions of cognition. It wouldn't have to go down to like separate avenue. It because I went through this with critical reasoning when I did a show like 2 Fridays ago or something. All these days are like Groundhog Day to me. But and so one of the things that I was pointing out is that we have multiple different parts of cognition. We have different functions of cognition, but those parts of cognition can function simultaneously at one time. Whereas I would think that a program would have to go down an algorithm for each function of cognition to come up with a final result. So it can hold information, and we can efficiently process all of the different aspects and dimensions or points of cognition at the same time, as opposed to having to compute them separately one at a time. Does that make sense?
It does, yeah, it does. So, well, I think computers don't do parallel processing as well, but they obviously don't do it as efficiently as humans. But it's a difference between sequential thinking and parallel thinking. So it becomes like a Gantt chart for a project. I've got this in my head because I've been looking at the project management software yesterday. So there's a critical path. So there must be a critical path for finding the answer to a question as well as like getting a project completed. So if you don't know the critical path, you're going to end up doing work that doesn't get you to the place where you get the answer to a question or whatever, or you create a particular type of behavior that would have a critical path as well.
Right. This is fascinating. Well, are you ready for another? We're down to the final two categories.
All right, remind me of the categories because I've completely forgotten again.
I know this game will do it to you. Which, and it's great because I'm hopeful that we'll get through all six. Typically, I've had people on like that were just for an hour, and there's no getting through all six of these topics in 1 hour. It's not happening.
I used to do philosophical interviews in a bar in Newcastle a few years ago on a Tuesday evening, and we used to invite people in off the street sometimes, or people would just turn up thinking it was a psychology meetup. There was a Romanian lady turned up one week, thinking it was a psychology group, and she came in and the people behind the bar pointed her to the group of strange people in the meet in the corner every week, which was us. She came in and introduced herself.
The strange people, okay. Oh Lord.
So ultimately, sometimes there was 12 people showed up to this group. It was amazing. It went through a peak of about 12 people for a few weeks. But anyway, I can't remember this lady's name, but she turned up thinking it was a psychology meetup. So we explained to her that it wasn't a psychology meetup, but that we sat in the corner drinking beer for 2.5 hours and we just asked people questions about stuff. My favourite question in that group was, what is time? So this woman turned up to a group that didn't exist and ended up in a group that did exist about a completely different subject that she knew nothing about, and she came in and just went, I don't know anything about philosophy, but if you want to ask me questions for 2.5 hours, I'll stay.
How did that go?
Did
she stay 2.5 hours?
Yeah, she stayed for 2.5 hours. She kept coming back. She was a regular for about six or 7 months after that.
Oh my gosh!
So that's how that group used to work. It was like I was running it. Basically, I was going in, clearing the space, setting up some Reiki, and just having the intention that everybody would get what they needed from the group, no matter what that was and no matter how it went. So it was totally open. I wish I could remember her name because she was fabulous.
She sounds fabulous. I mean, my God, how many people can just like be that, just go with the flow? I don't know anything about philosophy, but if this is about asking questions, I'll stay for 2.5 hours if you're asking me questions.
That's literally how it went. That's literally how it went. And we used to sometimes like we used to start about 5:45 in that group, and sometimes we'd still be there at midnight. So it'd be like 6 hours and lots of beer later, and we're being thrown out with the last people in the pub.
I love it. That is fabulous. It makes me want to start a group like that.
Honestly, it was such fun. It was such fun.
Oh my God, could you imagine if you did a broadcast of that group?
I don't think it hasn't crossed my mind. I might do it on Zoom at some point. I think it would work on Zoom because you can see enough body language and you can get an idea of people on Zoom.
How many people can be on Zoom at the same time?
On the account that I'm paying for, up to 100.
Wow.
So you
That
could have,
would be really, really fun.
so you could maybe have a panel of 5 or 6 or up to 12 people, because I know it works kind of with 12 people asking questions, but I don't think I could manage any more than 12 realistically.
So
But you could have
how,
an audience of 88 people as well, so it would be good.
oh my God, you'd be like great at round tables. So how did this situation, you cleared out the bar, you put Reiki, intending that everyone who attends gets what they need out of this. Okay. So is there a formal structure to it? Like where we're going to go clockwise and everyone takes turn asking a question? Do you have like a list of questions? I mean, how's that all work? This sounds fascinating.
We didn't have a formal list of questions, but I always asked the same question every week, which bored the pants off of everybody after 18 months. But it was my way of kind of assessing what was going on. So my question was always, what is time? Which is why I get on so well with Lenny.
I never knew that. I
Yeah,
never knew that.
So my
Dr.
question.
Lenny Time, did you know that? What is time?
So that's the
And it's the
synchronicity.
same question every week. And like for months, this one question
Well,
produces enough conversation and questioning and speculating and putting thoughts together. Really?
well, yeah. I mean, everybody else got to ask a question as well. I know you could follow up and do a little bit of. There was a little bit of interrogation.
Oh, I see. So you're saying like you asked the same question, but that doesn't mean the other people always came back with the same question. So you all did take turns asking questions.
Yeah, yeah. Everybody could ask follow-up questions. Usually 2 or 3 people would take the lead, but I always make sure to bring people in who were just observing and ask them if they wanted to ask questions or whatever, just to bring people in a little bit more. Sometimes
Were the
people don't.
questions off the top of the head or was it more prepared?
Well,
By the way, I think that is so you to ask the same question over 7 months.
over 18 months.
That just cracks me up.
18 months, every week for 18 months, I asked that question. Which is probably why the group stopped existing after 18 months, because everybody was so bored with me just doing the same thing every week.
How
But
to
to
lose a
me,
group in 18 months.
yeah. But to me, it was never the same. It was never the same question, because it was never the same week and never the same group and never the same interviewee or
Or
whatever.
the same dynamics and all that
Exactly.
stuff. Yeah.
Exactly.
No, I totally
Exactly.
get it.
So
See why I want to just like shadow you in UK for like I'm like, I just want to shadow Dennis for a whole week in UK and just like just you find these just like amazing things to do. And it it's just, oh my God, it's so funny. I love that she became a part of your group like for 8 months. Was
yeah,
English her second language?
yeah, absolutely. So
Was there a language barrier at all?
uh, no, as long as you're prepared to wait for the answer to the question, then no. She managed to come up with stuff that we understood and made sense. So it was all right. It was it slows things down maybe a little bit, but it gives us a chance to reflect on stuff as well. So she became a part of that group. She was an integral part of that group, and she turned up thinking it was a psychology group.
I love that. I love her spirit for staying.
Beautiful,
Oh
absolutely
my God.
beautiful. Great, wonderful, wonderful person. And there was another Romanian woman showed up to a group that I was running last year, and I can't remember her name either, but I was the only person there because nobody was showing up to this particular group, so I was. But it was still a group. It was free association, but it was the tail end of it. So we had a peak of about 8 people, and then somebody tried to disrupt it, like with another group sitting next to us, being very loud, deliberately trying to disrupt it, and then it kind of petered out after that. But I was still turning up with the assumption that it was going to be a group for like 5 or 6 weeks after this. So I was sitting having my cup of coffee, and a Romanian woman turned up from Nottingham, which is about 200 miles away, who'd got a thing about lighthouses. So she was up looking at a lighthouse on the coast about 15 miles away from Newcastle. And on the evening, she'd penciled this in as a thing to do in the evening on a Saturday. So we ended up having a chat about lighthouses. That became the key word for the free association, and then that turned into a tour guide. So I took her around Newcastle and showed her all the places that I like in Newcastle, and tried to make it kind of coordinate with lights. So I was kind of free associating tour guide.
Oh, I love that. That's like free association movement or free
Exactly.
association
Yeah.
tour. Yeah, tour guide.
Yeah, I did come up with a name for it, but I can't remember the name of the tours. I came up with this whole concept where people would be dressed up in costumes and making stuff.
You mean the costumes that you don't like to wear unless
Yeah,
you have the potential to win a monetary prize?
yeah. Well, this is a business. It was a business idea, so I would be being paid to wear the costume. So if I wear a
Oh,
Victorian
similar to my
costume,
plan to wear a Grim Reaper outfit and get get donations from bypassers who
yeah,
are
yeah,
sorry that I was a MIC graduate in '95.
yeah. So in theory, I was going to rope some people in from the soup kitchen and charge people for tours, and just and make it like half a real tour and half just making things up as we went along. Complete
It's
fantasy world.
entertainment.
So just like stop at a building, tell people the truth about one building, and then three buildings later, they've got used to you telling the historical truth about buildings. So you can just stop at a building and make something up completely randomly. And I just
Yes,
thought
and then they have to decide which ones were the truth and which
truth
one was
and
a lie.
which ones will lie. Exactly. So it makes it like a historical game, and it's about assessing people's body. Like I don't know, it seemed like a good idea at the time. It was all
It
based
is.
on,
It's a brilliant idea. I love it. I would go.
but it was all based on this random like bar crawl that I did with a Romanian who was looking at lighthouses. It was just like a weird Saturday night that turned into a good idea. I've completely
I
shifted
think
the
there's something
whole
there,
concept.
and I think this Zoom situation, especially right now, why people are um, shelter in place and stuff.
Yeah,
I mean, this is just all fun stuff. And the thing is that I mean, I don't know. Did it seem like there was a certain type of spirit or like kind of person? Everybody's different and unique. But I mean, just like the Romanian woman who shows up thinking she's coming to a psychology meeting or group, but is blows with the wind and just says, "Oh, okay, I don't know much about philosophy, but I'm willing to stay if, basically I'm not going to be bored the whole time and I'm going to be interacting with you guys." Or people or group or whatever. And
yeah,
so she went with the wind. Where the wind blew her, she went with it. And
yeah.
is that kind of how all the people are, or are there some that are just like more
Well, we had people in that group. We had a Jungian psychologist in that group for a while. So as a woman showed
a
up,
union psychologist?
Jungian, like
Oh,
Carl Jung.
Jungian. Okay, I was like, what's a union psychologist? Okay, yes, Jungian. I love Jungian. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so she was like taking the philosophy and the psychology and asking really like probing questions because she's used to doing that. She's trained to do that. And we had other people who were like students, people who were like 19-year-olds. We had a couple of guys who used to come along now and again who were like 21-year-old, dropped out from university, uh, like in between jobs or whatever, working in McDonald's part-time, but very incisive questioning, very logical minds, both Asperger's, I think, but very kind of logical, rational, good at putting things together, good at asking questions. So very different perspectives.
Yeah, I have yet to meet somebody with Asperger's that is not just absolutely brilliant.
Yeah, it seems to be. There seems to be a tendency with philosophy that people are not particularly good with people, or autistic, or have got something going on that kind of makes it difficult for them to interact socially with people. In this particular set of groups that I was running anyway, it's always about social isolation. So it's people who are looking for other people but aren't very good at connecting with other people.
Do you think that this kind of group that you fashioned or organized, whatever, would be, because we've talked about hikikomori and the epidemic in Japan of men between, at least I think we did, between 18 and 40, that
They
it's
get
their
stuck
parents
in
like
that bed
failure to
business.
launch, and there's just a like real extreme fear of being out amongst society. Therefore, they isolate because there's immense pressure to do well for the family name or to do what is expected. Otherwise, it brings shame to the family name or whatever. And I'm sure, I mean, that's generalizing it. That's not, I mean, completely. It is much more complicated than that. But I wonder if this kind of grouping, I mean, they're in, most of them are in their room all day.
Yeah, you could do that stuff on Zoom, and it's a way of getting people used to people again when they've been
Yeah.
isolated.
Yes.
So
Yes.
the more you get used to people, the less frightening it is to be with people.
Right.
So
That,
it's kind of, it might be a first or second step on the way, but it's part of the process, I think.
right. Well, and then it's a part of the process, and what some success has been with what's called quote unquote big sisters or older sisters or just sisters. Some of the organizations eh, have collected what is called a sister. They don't need to be psychologists or anything like that, but they just need to be empathetic, and they have to understand the the concept of it, and just be willing to be consistent, be on time, and whatever. And so parents are paying these sisters to come by, and I mean, one sister that was showcased on a video I saw, that at first it was like a step in the way. I mean, first all the communication was happening through a closed door, like, I'm not coming out, like, I'm staying in my room. And she accepted and was like, that's okay.
Yeah,
And
he was through the door until he's ready to do it
right.
out the door. Yeah,
And then eventually one day he said, okay, you can come in and talk to me within my inside my room. And then they set a goal, and eventually um, they they had a conversation out in the living room, which at any moment mom or dad could potentially pass by or whatever. But it was all about readapting to being social again. But this time without the fear of doing shame. I don't
yeah,
know. There might be something there, Dennis.
it's worth thinking about because you would like Skype, not so much, but Zoom seems to be better technology for like a panel game show or things like that. You could do with it. You can do breakout rooms and things like that. I've been looking at it because I've been thinking about what I can do with it. And it seems to be good technology for like small conferences and things like that. But you can just have fun with it. You can turn it into a bar, and I can just do the things that I was doing in the bar on Zoom because I've turned Zoom into a bar.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. But how do people show up? I mean, the Romanian woman just walked in or whatever. Is it, do people need to have an invitation, or do they just know, like, first come, first serve? Are you able to enter Zoom just like you would, let's say, a bar where it's like, huh, I found this room, I'm going to enter? Or does it have to be like invitation? I think
Uh,
it's interesting to have the unknown come together. I think that was part of what helped make that work in the bar where you were doing that, or the pub or whatever.
Yeah.
And
We
is
we used
that
to rope we used
capability?
we used to rope the barman in on his day off as well.
He spent his day off there?
He's on his day off, and we insisted that he came back and be interviewed. But the guy was doing
Oh,
was studying Roman history, so he was big on Roman philosophy.
oh
Fascinating
my
bloke.
gosh. I bet that was fascinating. Yeah,
Great, yeah, really nice bloke as
very
well.
few people are willing to go to their place of employment on their day off.
Well, we bought him beer,
Oh,
so there
well,
was
that
an
changes
incentive.
everything.
There was an incentive.
It
Yeah, it was
wasn't
good.
like it was completely twisting his arm.
No, it was an incentive, and he did come in a few times as well when his shifts were when he was available. He did come back, not regular, but he did come back. So I mean, that's all you can ask for with the group is like people. If people stay for a little while, then it suits them for that time, and then people's situations change and they move on or
Right.
whatever things
Yeah, they
on.
call that
So
open groups in psychology and sociology, that it's ongoing and it's got a specific enrollment and termination time. And so I think open groups, yeah, I like the format of open groups.
yeah, they can be fun. And I've been in a few, but the formats that I like the interview format is a great way to work because I can tell how people think just by the way they answer what is time. I can tell how much effort they've put into thinking about big topics by the
Okay.
question.
So
And
then I ask you, let's forbear the last two categories, and I'm going to ask you,
oh no, please don't.
open philosopher, what is time? I
Right,
have just turned the tables on you.
I don't even think time exists. I
Really?
yeah, I had a Sunday morning where I was thinking about gravity and galaxies and like quantum stuff, and I came to the conclusion that uh, everything is just one thing. So, like gravity somehow equals time, equals thought, equals all the other big topics that I had in a row. So all the things that are at the top of that hierarchy, all the philosophical, conceptual things, are all one thing. I don't know what that one thing is, but I
Oh,
think
well, how do you explain aging of anything? Anything in nature, anything, yeah, maturing, aging.
I think I don't know, but I think it's potentially about movement. So, because I can quite literally imagine myself as a 5-year-old. If I stand here now, I can in my memory I can pull up a memory of me as a 5-year-old, and then I don't necessarily start behaving like a 5-year-old, but I could potentially start behaving like a 5-year-old if I wanted to. Um, so I don't think the age is a physical thing. I think it's a I don't know an imagined space or something. I don't know. I haven't quite worked it out
But
yet.
if I look in a mirror, my reality is that gravity has taken place, or my eyesight is not as good as it used to be. I mean, I'm all about, age is a state of mind, but, physically, I enter a store and I'm sized up as, oh, there's no need to card you, or, whatever. I mean, once upon a time, I had an airline flight attendant tell me when I was at the age of 23 that I couldn't sit in the emergency exit because I needed to be at least 15. And I was like,
Right.
I'm 23. She's like, you're kidding. I go, I am so sick and tired. And my mother would say, Karen, someday you're gonna love looking younger than
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
but it's so it's there obviously is. I mean, that's part of my reality. If you look at me and I go to say, can I have a pack of cigarettes, or I'm going to buy this, case of beer or whatever. If you do that and they're like, oh, I don't need to card you, clearly I visually appear that I've aged past, the legal age or whatever.
Right. So, what about time is movement in consciousness?
Oh, good Lord.
As a
Okay,
starting point
time is movement in
in consciousness.
consciousness.
So,
Okay, that's really heavy.
well, it's part of
This
one of
is
your
when I cheat off of you and I'm like, hey, how
right,
do
but
you answer this question?
right, right, but that's one of your categories, isn't it? That's one of the categories we've got left. So I'm basically deflecting the question into a category.
Oh my God, how does not time and movement, or time
Oh,
in movement?
time is so
Time is
movement
movement.
in consciousness. So, uh,
So that's time equals movement.
in consciousness. So my consciousness of myself equals my age. So it's nothing to do with my body. It's to do with my perception of myself.
Oh, okay. I'm beginning to hook on here. All right. Okay, then let me ask you this. In
Yep.
algebra, certain words uh, translate to things,
Right.
to symbols or like mathematical equations. So is equal. So time is movement. Time equals movement. What would in be? It's not multiplication. It's not a
Uh,
division sign. Or is it a division
uh,
sign?
yeah, it might be a division. It's a fraction, isn't it? So something inside of something else makes it a fraction of something else.
Yes.
So it's got to be
So,
some kind of division.
oh my God, did we just come up with the next great scientific formula? Or it
Uh,
probably exists already and
I'm hoping at least you're recording it, so we won't lose it. I'll forget in 20 minutes.
so time equals movement divided by
Consciousness.
consciousness. So if you can measure movement and divide it by consciousness and come up with measurement for consciousness, then you have your answer for time.
Yeah, this is where I am today. Don't ask if you ask me again next week. I'll give you a completely different answer. Though.
You reserve the right to change your mind.
Absolutely. It's
And
because
I
I
always
think
say that
about
to everybody. I said we all reserve the right to change our mind.
absolutely because that's movement in consciousness, isn't it? That's what
It is
changing your mind
movement
is.
and consciousness. I see. Now, I would normally say, now this is what's interesting. You just said that's movement and consciousness. But what I was about to say at the same time was it takes time to sit back and observe. And after time, your observations might identify different patterns. Now, but you're exactly right. It's movement in consciousness. Holy shit.
So that's my definition for today of time.
Oh my God. Seriously. Oh my goodness. So, oh my gosh. This is amazing. I knew you were going to be great with People Sequel. Movement in consciousness. You change your mind. There's movement in consciousness. And I'm sitting here thinking, you sit back and you allow time to pass, you notice different patterns. But that's the same as saying there's movement in consciousness.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my God. Like, I'm literally like, wow. I'm having like a eureka moment.
Good. I like Eureka moments.
They're a little dizzying, I think, you know, because then I'm afraid, like, All right, I just pieced these things together. This is what it was like going through ethics graduate school, is that I'm like, okay, I think I just harnessed the idea and I'm real close to piecing it together. But
Yeah.
then like I lose it. And that's when I go to the guy that's got a PhD in theology and say, can you get me back on the harness again? Like I
Now,
can't.
a couple of years ago, when I was like technically, I was homeless at the time. I was staying at my mother's, but there was a conference, a 2-day conference on time at Durham University, which is free. It was basically for PhD students, and I walked in off the street basically, and
Oh,
sat in this conference that was like lecturers from PhD studies in various universities all over the country. And I'm like, I didn't understand a word that they said, but I did kind of grasp one of the models, which is like a flashlight model of consciousness. So if you imagine a block of consciousness with a light shining on it, you can only illuminate certain bits at certain, like if you move the flashlight, that's effectively what time is. It's called the flashlight model of consciousness. So, but that makes total sense to me. That's the only thing in that conference that I needed to understand, because it just makes total sense to me.
and so in flashlight consciousness, is there parallel thinking ability?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. I really don't know. I would probably need to go to another 2-day conference to work that out.
That's
Yeah,
interesting, though. I see what you're saying.
I suppose you could have another light on the other end of the battery that points in another direction. There's no reason why you couldn't.
Oh, that is interesting.
Or you could
But
have like lamps with two bulbs in them that point in slightly different directions. If we're using that analogy, we might as well.
or we could just like cover the whole flashlight with like tons of little tiny bulbs.
Yeah, make it like a bee, the way a bee sees the world, like a honey, like a fractal pattern or whatever. You could make it. It's like whatever assumptions you make are basically a filter on the flashlight.
Oh, I see. So that's interesting. Assumption is like a filter, or filter
Yes,
is like an assumption.
yeah, that's kind of, this is how I think of it. It may not be true at all, but that's the way that I think of it. So if you want
What
to
would
see,
life be like if we all looked through the same filter?
um, nobody would
Now
ever
I'm just
argue with
ad-libbing
anybody.
questions. You're my guest, and I'm
Nobody.
like, I'm not even giving you a category.
Well,
But what
one of
would
your
life be
categories
like
would.
if we all looked through the same filter? I mean, wouldn't it be like incredibly? Well, no, I'm not going to give my answer. You go ahead.
Well, it would just be like pointing at things, and nobody would need to say anything because everybody would know what you were pointing at and why. So there'll be no need for verbal communication. I'm guessing. I don't know, but so it would be like, so it would almost be
Because
like
they're all thinking the
telepathy.
same. It felt like a
That would
filter.
that would be parallel thinking with one filter. It would have to be, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would
Actually,
think that
so
if
without the same
everyone's
filter. So if humanity is one collective consciousness and we're each individual processes within that, then effectively humanity is a parallel processing system, for want of a better phrase, because each individual's got their own perspective. So I'm parallel processing my life while you're parallel processing yours, and then we combine it and we work out what's going on.
what is going on?
I've absolutely no idea. No idea at all.
What door did I just open? Oh God, my poor parents. Oh God. Oh,
Take a breath.
wow.
Take
That's
a breath.
amazing. Wow.
So in effect, the chat room turns into a parallel processing system. That's
Yes.
what it is.
Mhm.
Town square.
Yes.
And nobody knows it. Nobody has a clue what's going on, really. Everybody just has their own perspective on it.
Right.
But if you combine them together, you might get an idea of what might be going on, I think. But it would have to be every single person on the planet in the chat room to make it
Well,
a real thing, because it would have to be every point of view from every place.
but then there's all the other stuff. It's not just the people, but it's the trees, the plants, the animals, the grass, the rocks, which I
Yeah.
thought were non-living until I learned from Dr. Lenny Time. The water, all of that stuff.
Yeah, it would all have to be factored into the parallel processing thing. So this parallel processing thing basically turns into God, I think.
Oh my God, yes! No pun intended.
So we're just kind of parallel processors in the mind of God, for want of a better phrase. I think Bishop Berkeley got pretty close to that,
Yeah.
if you want a reference for it. But
Wow, this is really deep.
it's good for a Tuesday afternoon.
Yes. And now I understand why your group went on for so long.
Well,
Because,
we used to sit there and just keep going and going and going for 6 hours sometimes.
well,
With
because it makes it's
the
hard to break away from it. Once you hit that zip line, you're like, whoa, I'm in the zone. Like,
yeah. Plus, if you're in a bar, you're adding alcohol to it as well. So that definitely makes a difference. It was fun. It was good fun. I think I'm going to do that group on Zoom, because it was too much fun not to do it.
well, look at how much fun you're having today. You have
And
to.
I know. I brought, bizarrely enough, I bought a bottle of cold coffee this morning, which I don't ever normally do. But I drank it and I emptied it and I put gin and tonic in it. So I haven't opened it
Gin
yet.
and tonic and coffee?
Well, I drank the coffee, washed the bottle out, and then put gin and tonic in the coffee bottle. It's a Starbucks Frappuccino coffee bottle containing gin and tonic that I'm looking
Oh,
forward to getting into shortly.
oh, okay. I thought you were mixing. I was like, really? I thought that is a very strange combination to spike your coffee with gin and tonic. But again,
No,
welcome to my brain.
no,
Hello.
no. That hadn't occurred to me, but it might be something that's worth trying just for the hell of it.
Well, you know what? I have a friend that I love that she embraced her son exactly how he is. When she said, "What do you want to put on the pizza?" when she made homemade pizza, and he said apples. And she could have said, you know, no, apples is not one of the toppings that
Traditionally goes on a pizza.
people put on pizza. But she embraced the child's creativity and she said, okay, and she sliced up apples and put it on there and let the child decide based on experience whether or not he liked pizza with apples on top of it. He actually
Well,
liked it, and they said it wasn't that different from, pineapple. In fact, it was preferable to pineapple, like Hawaiian style pizza or whatever. And I
yeah.
was like, what I love about this whole story is that you just embraced your child. You didn't say, no, there's a limit, there's a barrier, there's a boundary. You don't put apples on pizza. You allowed the child to experience whether or not apples taste good on pizza. I
Absolutely,
love that. That's
absolutely.
so cool.
As you can literally, you can do what you like with it. You don't have to do what the traditional thing is to do with a pizza, because it's your pizza. You can do what you like with it.
Right. And so how much stuff, especially not knowing the real answer to time, but how much of what we do is just because it's ingrained in us and we
Oh,
can't think out of the box. We just
almost,
can't.
almost everything,
Yeah.
almost everything. Which is why being unemployed is so much fun, because I get
Exactly. I always say saying that. I go, if you want to have a creative life, I said, there is nothing like getting creative when you've got $0 in your bank account.
Yeah, absolutely. You have to. You absolutely have to, because
Yeah.
you've got no choice but to be creative. So you have to make the best use of your time, which means you can't afford to do anything that anybody else is doing. So you have to do something that you are capable of doing with no money.
Oh, completely. And I think this is why I was so great at complex problem solving in like what they would call like social work nightmare cases, that like in every domain there was some kind of something. I'm like, bring it on, as a challenge. You know,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah,
solve it. It might not be quick, but it became, it's like, wow, there's so many barriers. I really have to get creative in how I might solve this. I love doing that.
yeah. It's funny, but that's life in general. It's always about, like, if you know where the boundaries are. It's like if you're going to move to the next stage. Like when I was living in my place in Heworth last year, it was last year. I had no gas, no electric, no hot
I
water,
remember. I
no
remember.
money, and I flipped that around in a year. I
Yes.
I imagined the center exactly where my flat is now.
Yeah.
So,
Hey,
so it
listen,
took
we're
me a
out of
minute to
time.
make. Yeah.
We're out of time. I'm so sorry, but I've so enjoyed having you on today. Thank you for your time. And thank you to everyone in chat and at Revolution Radio. And that's
Yeah.
basically that. And we're over and out. And I'll catch you later.
All right. Good stuff, Karen. I enjoyed it.
Me too. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye bye.